It's the Kick Out podcast, and you know what? This is amazing. We have got an absolute legend on the show today. I'm sad that Flu's not here. I'm sure that Flu would have loved this.
Yeah,
but,
he would have.
We are very excited to have on the show the greatest entertainer of all time, the greatest singer of all time. He told me off for not using that in my intro before. He is a WWE Hall of Famer. One of the greatest IC champions of all time. What is going on, Jeff Jarrett? How are you?
Ace, how we doing, my friends? I appreciate you finally having me on. I've begged, I've tweeted, I've emailed, I've WhatsApped, old school. I put snail mail, and finally Skillit let me on. You won't let me on. Skillit let me on. Well, finally.
How have you been, man? How have you been during this crazy year that we've had?
You know, me and you, we've WhatsApped each other a couple of times, but and we were talking off air that you know, my kids are back in school. It's been a real challenge for everybody. It's kind of I'm from Nashville, so you guys can relate to the music side of it. The touring business, I have a lot of friends that either play or roadies or sound or part of the touring. I mean, they just shut down. I had two of my buddies, closest buddies, were actually in Omaha at a sold out concert. They had loaded in that day, and I still can't. I tell this story, but that's the real reality of it. They had 1.2 million in the box office, and they had to give it back.
Oh wow!
So I mean, that's how. I mean, boom. And so I tell that story just how representative that the world we're living in, and that we've all lived in over the last year, and hopefully it's in our rearview mirror. But it appears things are heading the right direction. The craziness of everything, but man, it's been devastating. My sister just got out of the hospital with COVID, and so you know, it's I think cancer has touched all of our lives one way or another over the years, and I would have never thought in March of 2020 that a year later, or a little bit a year later, we'd be saying, yeah, COVID's going to touch someone you know.
It's crazy.
Because it's hard. I don't know of anybody now. I mean, it's touched everybody's lives in one way or another. And man, it's gotten so divisive, and the nonsense with no mask. I don't want to get into politics. It'll drive me crazy, but it's tough. It's been really a challenge. And I know this is a wrestling podcast, but Ace, you threw the line out there wanting to talk about this crazy year. It's really bizarre. But hey, man, we all made it through it. We're here to talk about my world and your podcast. So
for sure, I wanted to start with COVID because what was it like for you to watch those early days of wrestling with no crowds? It was really strange for us. And what was that like for you?
Yeah, good. I mean, actually, that's a good jumping off point. You know, to get in a ring and you know, it's a whole different vibe to you know. Once I sort of at 15 or 16 years of age, got in and did that early training, I quit taking bumps unless there were people around. So because of the energy, I mean, it's just that simple. So look at Skillit laughing at me. But that's a real reality. But you know, it's how the world changed, and the Thunderdome was so cool, and being there and hearing on that, but no people in the crowd, and it's as a third generation promoter. I've candidly said, folks, without people, you don't have a promotion. Just like Ace, without listeners, okay, great. You can talk to a microphone. Big deal.
What's the point?
You're missing the whole point. So to be that performer, and yes, it was going around the world, and the whole globe got to see it at a time that was, in my opinion, desperately needed. But to still not have that live crowd, it was without question an adjustment. And then you watch some football, or I call it soccer, but when you watch some of those games with no people and they did the really crappy crowd noise that just didn't feel right, it's been an adjustment across the board and wacky. But man, yeah, you talk about really unique. Back in last year, March, April, May, until this sort of hit the groove, it was really, really different, unique.
So I noticed that you mentioned, your family, being a third generation wrestler, performer, and promoter as well. Starting off in your debut in the wrestling industry, you used to wrestle for your father's business, the USWA. 7 years deep as a babyface. What was that like working for your father, and then transition into the WWF at the time, but not WWE?
Skillit, I've been doing the rounds and the continued rounds to talk about my world and the launch, but they've asked that sort of question, that transition in your history. Yes, I was a babyface for 7 years. By the time I got to WWF, I was so ready to be a heel. But the one thing that to get in the ins and outs of the industry, being a young babyface, the heel, quote unquote, was the ring general, led the match. And so it helped me grow as a performer exponentially. Also being, with the last name, it wasn't like, and many folks have said this, me being the kid of a promoter is the greatest thing for my career and the worst thing. But in the early days, it really helped out a lot because I had been to all these towns before. I'd been around. I'd known the folks. It was a weekly territory. I tell folks that are breaking in, in my first 7 years, I wrestled essentially 7 days a week, sometimes 6, but sometimes twice on those sites. For give or take, I had 2,000 matches in my first 7 years. That if you can't cut your teeth on that, nothing will. But from the time I was 18 to the time I was 24, 25. Honing my skills and getting to wrestle folks from anybody, and I'm going to throw some names out there. But I was 19 years old and got to wrestle Nick Bockwinkel.
Yes,
he was 53 at the time. I got to wrestle Jerry Lawler. I got to wrestle Akio Sato, who was a Japanese wrestler who taught me the ropes. Then I got to go to the Moondogs. So whether it was in ring, mat wrestling, we did hardcore wrestling before it's called hardcore. But no, all different facets. Those first 7 years as a babyface were, without question, the foundation of my career.
I felt like, because yes, you just mentioned some really top stars there, some really big names in wrestling, especially around that territory. And a lot of people coming from that background would kind of maybe, when they move to WWE, they would probably want to kind of keep that kind of persona and keep serious and be like, no, I want to be this type of wrestler. And then Vince presents you with the Double J gimmick. But it felt to me, even as a kid watching you, I felt like you enjoyed it. I don't feel like you complained much about your gimmicks at all.
You hated me, didn't you, Skillit?
I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna be honest. I'm going to be honest. You have a great talent of making people hate you, even though you're a great worker.
I can assure you this: if I'd have known you back in the '90s, I'd have hated you. So we're even. But no, it was, again, that was one of the things that from at a very early age, I can remember when the Andy Kaufman, Jerry Lawler, David Letterman storyline, although that was shocking and cool and all this, I was blessed because I got to look through it through the eyes of a business. And so when Vince and myself and we started collaborating on the Double J character, I could immediately sort of go, okay, this will make me stand out. I'm the hillbilly, Southern boy, whatever you want to call it. Can't get rid of my accent. But stepping on, and at those times, especially, the WWF, it was a New York City based, in the city slicker. In those days, whether it was NWA or WCW, but it just had that stigma. So I was an immediate heel, so to speak, and it stood out, and I loved it and embraced it.
Yeah. Being the son of a promoter, like you said, obviously, I guess it kind of puts you in some nice positions at times. But then at the same time, where you said you get a lot of stick for it because maybe people are, they think it's a bit of nepotism. That is he really, achieving these positions on his own merit? How did you deal with that?
And I will, and it's actually documented. Me and my dad have had a couple of falling outs over the years. But he had seen other promoters' kids fall flat on their face before I got into the industry. And he just had it in his mind, I'm going to make it harder on him. And I can tell you, I used to have the pay stubs to prove it. There was no favoritism. Matter of fact, there were some things that if you go to a show and somebody didn't show up and somebody's going to have to wrestle twice or 3 times, it was me. I always had to do the extra mile. It was, and sometimes my old man would go out of his way. Jerry Lawler has, if you ever get him, ask him some of those stories, because he can tell you a few of those but so I'm thankful though, at this stage of my career, that my father looked at it that way. So, but it's a very natural thing in the industry, because, and I've always tried to drill it down like this. In our business, especially way back when, you show up in a dressing room, in a locker room, and half the people are going to get news that they probably don't like, because they're going to have to get beat that night. So that's a unique industry. It's a very unique industry that okay, you're winning tonight, you're losing tonight. So all that. So me being a baby face and that, I mean, our business somewhat breeds, and I don't want to call it insecurity, but everybody is crawling and doing whatever they have to do to get on top. And if they're not good enough to be on top, then it's easy to point fingers. It's very hard for the human mind to look inward and say, what can I do to be better? So me being in that number 2 slot in the territory under Jerry Lawler, the legend, a lot of times it was very simplistic jealousy or whatever it may be. So that's why I always took a lot of pride in making sure that I worked very hard day in, day out, learned my craft, did what I had to do. In spite of all that, I still had my ups and downs with other talent, but it's I learned that's a part of it, truly a part of it.
So you finally make your debut in the WWE. Well, this is back in '93. So I think it was '93 when you made your debut with WWE.
October.
And you were presented as the Double J gimmick. How much of that input did you have in that character? Was that all Vince? Was that the team behind that? Was it you? Could you have your input with what you wore and the strut? You used to do the strut and everything. How much say did you have in that?
Well, and again, obviously the business has radically changed in a lot of ways, but I would work for my father, and so I didn't really have an input on my character for him. I was Jeff Jarrett, whatever, is the golden boy. So we had a working relationship, my dad and Vince, and it goes back to Vince's father, Vince Sr. So they had a working relationship, and so I knew Vince had taken a look in '92, and actually WCW had wanted me to come on board in '90. So when it was ready to come time, Vince was rolling around in his own brain. What kind of character? And Bruce Pritchard of something to wrestle with. He was sort of right in the middle of all that. What is that character? And it just sort of came natural that it wasn't hard with JEFF, JARR, and Vince is the one. What a unique name. Yeah, I've been called JJ and as a basketball nickname, but Vince just sort of rolled off the 2 J's, 2 R's, 2 T's and all that. And then the country music. Nashville again in '93, '92, the city of Nashville was transitioning from quote unquote country and Western music to really that pop country. It had begun to take on a new life. So it just sort of fit.
You one of your nicknames, the greatest IC champion of all time. You obviously took a lot of pride in being the Intercontinental Champion. Talk to us about that belt and its legacy and what that title actually means to you.
Yeah, when I got there, in '93, you sort of have to look, if you can just crystallize the time of the legacy of that belt from Brett, from Piper. They had a story. Kurt Hennig. We could name Tito. There's Savage, Steamboat, whoever you name it. That IC slot was a really unique slot, especially during that era. So during '94, as the character began to build and get momentum, and Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, and Shawn Michaels were doing their IC deal. And so when the time came and everything just started gelling together, I knew I was going to have a huge opportunity. And to sort of in early '95 and Rumble, and knowing that to sort of reach that milestone in my career, I was very happy. Somewhat, it's one of those deals that winning that title at Royal Rumble '95 was as real as it can get. We alluded when me and Ace were talking about Sasha and Bianca a real moment at WrestleMania, and we could go down to hundreds. Austin and Rock, real moments. John Cena in his promos, he can make it real like that. So when you have sort of those real moments in sports entertainment, the audience knows without question. It was a real moment for me when I captured the IC title against Razor Ramon, who was a incredible talent, and his character was on fire during that time.
I always felt you and Razor had some great matches. You and Razor and you and Sean. I think that I honestly believe growing up, that was probably the best matches you've had in the WWE for me. I think Sean and Razor is your best opponents. You know,
when people really drill down and say, come on, it's hard for me to say the best singles match because I've had a lot of different types of opponents. You name it, from Kurt Angle to Sean. I mean, just all different styles, and I've been around a few years. But there was a series of tag matches that it was me and Sean with the Road Dogg in our corner as the roadie against Kevin and Scott, Razor and Diesel. And we had a series of tag matches that went all over the world. We did them in Germany. We did them in the UK. We did them across America. That was about every night, about 40 minutes. And those tag matches, I've really find it hard because we weren't, like I call it a bookend tag team, like a Rock and Roll Express or Road Warriors. We were 4 individuals and count Rhodey 5 coming together. And so the 5 different characters with 5 different personalities and sort of the intersection, because I'd wrestled Diesel and we'd all wrestled each other and had somewhat of a storyline together. Those were some fantastic. I wish I had all those recorded because they were some really, really good matches.
It seems that you were very close with that bunch, Kevin, the Nash, Scott Hall, Shaw. Am I right in thinking, because I know that the iconic photo of when Sean and Razor and Diesel was leaving to go WCW and they had that infamous click moment. Am I right in thinking you were part of that too, backstage?
I was gone.
You were gone by then.
Right. If you remember, in '95, I walked out. That's all.
Oh, yes, you walked out with.
You can tune in to My World podcast. In a couple of months and hear every nook and cranny of that story.
That's right. No, I'm sorry.
Prior to leaving, that was sort of the crew that was on the road together. The 5 of us up and down the cars, and we traveled together quite a bit.
So yes, you were gone. You went to WCW. You joined the Horsemen, and shortly after that, you came back to WWE and did a little NWA invasion.
There you go.
I remember this off the top of my head, by the way. This is not.
No, you can steal it. Get out of here. No prep work.
No, this is not written down. This is.
It's scary. He knows too much. It's scary.
I just gotta say this. You're a sick man. I'm kidding. I love it. Look, I'm the biggest. Look, I was a wrestling fan long before I was a performer. So all kidding aside, a lot of respect for that. I'm that way that my wife Karen sometimes will go, you remember what kind of tights and boots and city and what Waffle House you ate at and what hotel and what kind of car you rented, and you can't remember yesterday. I mean, you can't remember today to bring me up. I mean, just it is what it is.
Oh yeah, I want to be conscious of your time because obviously I know
we could talk all day, couldn't we?
Okay, good.
No. I said we could talk all day.
Can we quickly touch on your time at WCW? Like as wrestling fans, like we've watched everything about the Monday Night Wars and all that time in WCW, and it looked chaotic. But it was fun for us to watch as people. Like, what was it like as a performer on that roster during that time when NWO were running wild and Vince Russo was booking the show? And all of that. Like, what was it like as a performer for you?
Well, again, I'll go back to sort of my roots. When I left the first time and went, and that's when Nitro was, I went there, I'd have been 96, October of 96. I mean, it was red hot. I can remember me being signed up to do autograph sessions for tickets going on sale 3 months before, 4 months before for a Nitro. And then all of a sudden I'd get back in those days, a phone call. Hey, that appearance is canceled. It's sold out. Wow. I'm like literally the day the tickets went on sale, it was a sellout. And so seeing that from a business perspective and into the late 90s, but just the business was hot. But knowing how hot the business was, but also coming from, I'll call it WWF, Vince McMahon world, you knew where the buck stopped. You knew that, okay, he's the boss, and here's this lieutenant, and here's that lieutenant, and these lieutenants have these two guys that work for them. I mean, a true
hierarchy.
That's what I fundamentally believe. That's how any form of entertainment, you have to have a decision maker. Oh no, this song's going to be released on this day. You got to have somebody. If it's a democratic, and I get all that. I'm a huge, anybody that's worked with me or for me knows I want as much input. But at the end of the day, you sort of got to have this as a decision maker. Well, to go from the world of Vince McMahon to AOL, Time Warner, WCW, with no one really clear cut, this guy had creative control, and this guy had creative control, and this guy's not coming because he's already fulfilled these kind of dates. I mean, you talk about it, it was unbelievably the difference on how things were run backstage. And I'm not just saying trying to get answers, but just the entire vibe of the entire organization. You could tell that WCW was corporate, and as big as the WWF was at that time, it was still a lot to this day. It's still, there's no question, where the buck stops.
Yeah.
During your time there, you obviously held the WCW World Heavyweight Championship, which is, for me, one of the most iconic belts in the industry. Several-time NWA champion. What is that feeling like when you're told that you're going to be world champion? You're going to be, ultimately the face of the business, the company, and driving it forward. And also, which belt meant more to you holding in terms of WCW?
All right. Now, which belt? Because it comes on times. And a lot of times, like the IC belt, the very first time, that was really a unique experience just because, again, I had come from Tennessee and worked in the territories and did some stuff in Japan and Puerto Rico. And so the first IC time, and then WCW, the U.S. title, and working through that was pretty cool, the different opponents. And then back up there with the IC runs, and then the world title run, and sort of the reboot that went down with the Millionaires Club versus just the storylines. Every one of them had a different context, if you will. And a lot of times, like it on the NWA, when we were rocking and rolling at TNA, different things with injuries and guys coming up with contracts, that it was like, man, I got to find the right opponent to work. So it's looking at through the eyes with a business lens. There is a lot of pressure. I'll just say that there's a lot of pressure that goes with that, being out front. But it's part of the industry, and it's something I love more today than I ever have.
So I want to circle back to an iconic match that you were involved in. It caused a lot of controversy in the industry. But I just get a picture of you not really minding about taking a fall to the Hall of Famer now, the legendary Chyna, and losing the IC title to her. What was that when you were told you were going to drop the belt to?
So on the very great segue on the very first episode of My World, that's what we're covering.
Hey.
But it goes without saying, it's a great question. I'm glad, folks, we didn't script this. Skillit literally came off the top rope with that question, which is great. But I'll tell you this: you've invited me on, and the story that led up to that, and I've been asked often, oh, you didn't want to do that or all this. You just sort of got, again, I was blessed with the promoter's mindset in the Attitude Era. And, I had different opponents, all that different, just all that. When you heard DX come out and the entrances and, at that time, I mean, Road Dogg was red hot.
Absolutely.
Red hot. I think the WrestleMania, whatever that one was, I think he was the number 2 behind Austin merchandise seller, the dog pound. Wow. Anyway, so DX was red hot and X-Pac was red hot. But Chyna was, because of how it was positioned, and I could get really long-winded, and I know we don't have time, but but her positioning, not just on the card, but within DX and my persona and character, I was elated. I knew that you don't get many opportunities to do this kind of stuff. And I hadn't been right a lot of times in my life, but I'm right because we're still talking about it today. Absolutely. That it was an impactful, very creative at times. I figured forward Cindy Margolis and makeup people and you name it. I hit them with the guitars and just that entire build was really good. And knowing where the payoff was coming, it was again, when we started that, I had no idea that my contract would intersect with all of that. I had no idea, but it did, which makes the story even better.
So after that, Ace, you have a question? You have a question? I was going to say, after that was done with Chyna, you went to WCW, obviously became the champion. When WCW finally closed, you took a few years out. Oh, no, I don't know if you took a few years out. You just went straight into developing TNA, right? Went straight into
and we're going to have to wrap this. I just look. Time
really
is money.
I do apologize.
No. So March was the last 201 of Nitro. I still was going to get paid almost through the end of the year. So that whole time was, and I'm going to get great job. Go home. We're going to pay you. Okay. But during that time, and then the following June is when TNA launched. So I had a summer off essentially to really think, but I toured with a couple of different promoters. I toured UK twice, Australia twice. So I stayed busy.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Jeff, I know we got to go, but you are jumping into the world of podcasting. Tell us a little bit about your podcast and how they can listen to it.
You can download right now. May 4th is when we launch. Every Tuesday, starting May 4th, the podcast is My World with Jeff Jarrett, my co-host Conrad Thompson, and Conrad, you guys know well.
Yeah, he's the greatest podcaster in wrestling. The greatest.
There you go. Bruce Pritchard, 83 Weeks with Bischoff, Tony Schiavone, Jim Ross, Kurt Angle, Arn Anderson. Really cool. And he's asked me for several years. The timing was right. So we're excited. You can, all of my socials, whether it's a website, we just launched a website, realjeffjarrett.com, or Twitter, Instagram. My kids got me on TikTok, but I hadn't put anything on there yet.
We need to see you doing the darkness, Jeff.
Real Jeff Jarrett. So no, I appreciate you guys having me on. But no, we launched Tuesday, May 4th. You can subscribe now. Check it out. The one thing that I told Conrad that I was doing this interview today, I said something. And he goes, "Man, I'm ready to do some live events over there." So when we do the live event, Ace,
yeah, man, we're coming.
Better show up.
I'm there. We're there. 100%. 100%. We're there. Jeff, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. And you know what? Jeff Jarrett always picks up the phone for me as well. So I appreciate that. You are the man. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you so much, brother.
No, thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Max?
Yeah.
I don't know how you put up with these guys. Yeah, I'm kidding.
I'm trying.
Thank you very much.
All the best, Jeff.